An elderly man stood in the middle of a crowded bank, his face etched with frustration and defeat, as his request was coldly dismissed. Just as hope seemed lost, a familiar face stepped forward, a figure so renowned, yet so unexpectedly humble, and changed the course of the day in an unforgettable way. Where are you watching from? Share in the comments below, and be sure to hit subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Welcome back to Motivation for Success, the channel where real-life stories ignite your passion for kindness, justice, and perseverance. Let's dive into today's powerful tale of compassion and courage. Be sure to leave your thoughts and reactions in the comments as we go. It all began on a bustling Monday afternoon at Redwood Bank, a widely recognized financial institution in the center of a large city. The line for customer service snaked around velvet barriers, brimming with individuals who had daily tasks, some depositing checks, others inquiring about loans, and many waiting to fix minor account issues. The air buzzed with anxious murmurs, and the constant beeping of various machines seemed to set a frantic tempo. Positioned somewhere in the middle of the line was Caroline Edwards, an elderly woman in her late 70s. Caroline had come armed with a small envelope containing her latest bank statements. She was determined to straighten out some mysterious charges that had appeared on her account, which threatened to push her already slim budget into crisis. Nervousness weighed on her. These fees, though tiny to some, were essential to her financial survival. In her trembling hands lay the quiet proof that something wasn't right. But Caroline had no idea that she was about to face more than a simple bureaucratic headache. She was on the cusp of an experience so humiliating that it could have broken her spirit entirely, if not for the intervention of an unexpected ally. Behind the main counter stood Riley Johnson, a young teller, looking fatigued from the relentless flow of customers. Next to Riley, in a somewhat hidden corner office, was the branch manager, Paul Evans. Paul was known for focusing his attention on clients he deemed important, often those with substantial balances. If you didn't meet his silent criteria, you'd likely be left waiting. Caroline, meanwhile, adjusted the fraying edges of her worn-out cardigan, gathering the resolve to speak up. After nearly half an hour in line, she finally stepped forward to Riley's station. Riley gave her a fleeting glance, still typing away on the computer. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Riley said, barely meeting Caroline's gaze. "How can I help you today?" Caroline nodded politely. "I've noticed some questionable fees on my statements. They've been appearing for the last few months, and I can't figure out why." She slid the envelope across the counter, hoping her trembling fingers didn't betray her anxiety. Riley pursed her lips, opened the envelope, and skimmed the pages. It was clear from her expression that she was not in the mood for a complicated explanation. "These charges, Ms. Edwards," Riley began in a measured tone, "are standard bank fees applied to maintain certain account types." Caroline leaned forward. "But I've had this account for over a decade, and these fees are new. I was never warned about them." Riley exhaled dramatically. "Everything is in the contract you would have signed when you opened your account. Perhaps you missed that section." A few nearby customers started to watch the conversation, sensing the tension. Caroline's cheeks flushed. "I just want to know why they showed up suddenly. I live on a fixed income, and..." Before she could finish, Riley held up a hand. "Ma'am, if you can't meet the requirements, the bank automatically charges fees. It's all quite routine." At that moment, Paul Evans emerged from his office, scanning the lobby as though everything needed to be under his scrutiny. His gaze landed on Caroline, then on Riley, and he raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong here?" he asked, stepping in with an air of impatience. Riley shrugged as if Caroline were a trivial inconvenience. "Just a customer confused about standard procedures." Paul approached the counter, crossing his arms. His stern, unwelcoming presence made Caroline feel even more out of place. "We have clearly stated policies. If she can't comply, there's not much we can do," he said. Caroline's heart pounded in her chest. I never knew about these sudden fees," she tried once more, voice trembling. It seems like a mistake. Paul's lips curled into an almost mocking half-smile. It's no mistake. You should have kept a closer eye on your account. Fees don't just appear. They're triggered by certain conditions. The hush that fell over the immediate area around them was palpable. Customers nearby began whispering among themselves, and Caroline felt their eyes boring into her. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. Just when it seemed Caroline's voice would be swallowed by shame, another voice broke through the crowd. A calm, steady voice that echoed with quiet authority. Is there a reason you're treating her with so little respect? At first, no one recognized the speaker. He was dressed in simple clothes, a jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, and an air of casual confidence. His face was partially shadowed. However, once he stepped closer and lifted the cap, a slow ripple of realization spread across the bank lobby like a wave. Keanu Reeves. Murmurs swept across the waiting customers. Phone cameras subtly rose to eye level, shocked looks replaced curious ones. Keanu, a name associated with film and philanthropy, was the last person anyone expected to see in a routine bank line. He didn't posture or raise his voice. Instead, he fixed a firm, level gaze on Paul Evans. Why are you talking to her like that? Paul blinked, momentarily speechless. Well, Mr. Reeves, I apologize if this is causing a disturbance, but we follow strict guidelines here. Keanu took a step closer to the counter, placing a gentle hand on Caroline's shoulder. That might be so, but this doesn't seem like an ordinary policy discussion. It feels more like bullying. Riley shrank back, clearly conflicted. Paul, however, stiffened as though threatened by this public spotlight. With all due respect, this is none of your concern. Keanu's brow furrowed slightly, but his voice remained calm. It becomes my concern when I see someone being mistreated. I'm not here to cause trouble, but I can't stand by and watch. Caroline, had lowered moments before, looked up at her unexpected defender. She saw sincerity in Keanu's eyes. I only wanted to see if this could be corrected, she whispered, her voice husky with emotion. You heard the lady, Keanu said, turning once more to Paul. She needs clarification and respect. Can you manage that? Paul's cheeks darkened with anger, but he seemed uncertain how to proceed. Turning to his employee, he barked, Riley, recheck the details on her account now. Riley, visibly uneasy, typed furiously on her computer. In the lull, the bank lobby was eerily quiet, no one wanted to miss a word. Keanu waited patiently, and Caroline could almost feel a collective tension building in the room. After a few intense minutes, Riley's eyes darted from the screen to Paul. Sir, Riley said, these fees, they're not consistent with the usual charges. They've been added every month for the past 3 months under some line item that isn't standard. Paul cleared his throat. Well, the system, it's possible there's a glitch. Caroline's eyes widened. A glitch that specifically affects people like me? Keanu leaned forward. What do you mean by, people like you? Taking a moment to steady her breath, Caroline explained, I spoke with a friend who also noticed strange fees around the same time. We're both on fixed incomes. We've been banking here for years, yet these charges started appearing recently. Paul looked increasingly nervous, as though an unspoken truth was creeping into the open. We'll handle this internally, he declared, trying to reassert control. Keanu didn't budge. Not if people are being systematically charged without explanation. That's not just a mistake, it sounds like you're targeting certain customers. A handful of onlookers nodded in agreement, stepping closer to hear the details. Paul's posture stiffened even more. Mr. Reeves, you're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Keanu asked calmly, crossing his arms. If there's nothing to hide, you'll have no problem correcting the error for Ms. Edwards and others who have been affected. Right? All eyes turned back to Riley, who was busy examining the code for the fees. Her face went pale. "It's more widespread than I realized, sir," she murmured to Paul, though her voice carried enough for all to hear. "It's not just Ms. Edwards. There are multiple accounts, all seniors, all getting the same charge." A pin-drop silence took over. Every customer within earshot felt a combination of shock and betrayal. Many of them immediately began mentally checking whether they, too, had been hit with similar charges. Caroline's shoulders sagged in relief, but a spark of anger also lit in her eyes. "I knew something was off. How can you do that to people on fixed incomes?" Paul raised his hands defensively. "Let's not jump to conclusions. There might be an outdated system code, or an oversight. Or a deliberate tactic," Keanu cut in, his voice measured but firm. "I don't want to assume the worst. But it looks suspicious." By now, every person in the bank was transfixed. Some were recording video on their phones, others were simply too stunned to move. Paul swallowed hard, aware of the deepening public relations nightmare unfolding around him. Keanu gently touched Caroline's elbow to steady her. "I can try to help get this sorted," he said softly. "But we need honesty first." Caroline nodded, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "I appreciate this more than I can say." Turning again to Paul and Riley, Keanu asked, "So how do we fix this for all affected customers right now?" Riley's voice quivered. "We can reimburse the fees and run a system check to see when these charges began. But it will take time. I'll also need higher authorization." Paul let out a labored breath. "All right," he conceded, "we'll do a comprehensive review." His eyes darted nervously to the growing crowd, then to the overhead security cameras. He realized there was no easy exit from this ordeal. Keanu watched Paul intently. "A thorough audit is a good start. But this doesn't just go away with a few keystrokes." Paul shook his head, pressing a hand to his temple. "We have an internal protocol for these matters." "This is bigger than protocol," Keanu responded. "When you systematically overcharge people, especially elderly customers, it's not a minor glitch. It's exploitation. We need a promise that this will be reported, corrected, and that the customers will be reimbursed for any stress or financial harm." Caroline found her voice again. "And you should notify everyone who might be affected, not just those who notice the charges. Many seniors might not even realize they're losing this money." Paul, shoulders sagging, looked at Riley, who gave a tiny nod. It was plain they were running out of ways to dodge responsibility. "We will. I give you my word," Paul said, though his tone suggested he had little choice. Even with Paul's reluctant agreement, the atmosphere remained electric. Some customers stepped out of line to gather near Caroline and Keanu. A few individuals started peppering questions at the staff, asking to check their accounts, to ensure they weren't also victims of system errors. Paul motioned for Riley to address the small crowd forming. "One at a time, please," she said, trying to maintain composure. Keanu turned to Caroline. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, noticing her trembling hands. Caroline nodded weakly. "I am now, thanks to you." He gave her a reassuring smile. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. Their exchange was interrupted by a middle-aged woman who stepped forward and locked eyes with Caroline. "I've been seeing odd fees, too," the woman said, voice shaky. "Thought I was the only one." Caroline reached out and patted the woman's hand gently. "You're not alone." Keanu's presence had emboldened others. Soon, more customers began voicing similar experiences. Tensions ran high, Paul looked cornered, and Riley did her best to keep calm under the onslaught of demands. After nearly 30 minutes of intense back and forth, Paul finally invited Caroline, Keanu, and 2 other affected customers into his cramped office. The makeshift meeting involved Paul rapidly tapping at his computer, verifying each account. Riley hovered at the doorway, balancing stacks of printouts. Her gaze revealed alarm as each set of documents confirmed the unauthorized charges. "I didn't realize it was so extensive," she whispered, handing fresh pages to Paul. Caroline raised an eyebrow at the manager. "So this is real, then? We're not imagining it?" Paul's fingers stalled on the keyboard. "There's no denying it," he admitted, voice low. "The fees are outside the normal scope. They appear to have been coded into a cluster of accounts that share certain demographic details." Keanu narrowed his eyes. "Demographic details meaning older account holders?" Paul looked down at the desk. "Yes," he answered, barely audible. A shared sense of outrage filled the cramped office. One of the other customers, a gentleman named James Lawson, spoke up. "How could this have been overlooked for so long? I've been with this bank for 15 years. Never any problems, until now." Paul was at a loss. "I don't have an explanation yet. We'll have to conduct a full investigation." Keanu crossed his arms. "An investigation that must be transparent. You can't just sweep this under the rug and hope no one notices." Paul nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand." Caroline glanced at Keanu, gratitude mixing with lingering frustration. "Thank you for standing up for us. Most people would have ignored it." Keanu's voice softened. "I can't stand by while people are wronged. It's not about making a scene, it's about making it right." Soon enough, word spread beyond the bank's walls. While Paul was scrambling to contain the issue internally, several customers had already uploaded snippets of video featuring Keanu Reeves intervening in a tense confrontation. Social media lit up with both support and anger, support for Keanu and the mistreated customers, and outrage at Redwood Bank's potential exploitation of seniors. Realizing a storm was brewing, Redwood Bank's head office was forced to issue a statement by the end of the day. They apologized for the technical error and promised a thorough audit. They vowed that all affected customers would not only be reimbursed but would also receive a personal apology for the inconvenience and distress caused. Caroline was contacted directly by an executive from Redwood Bank, offering compensation for her troubles. They insisted Paul had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and the bank would upgrade her to a fee-free account permanently. Still, for Caroline, the greatest relief was the validation of her claim and the knowledge that others would also be spared. A few days after the ordeal, Caroline was invited back to the bank to finalize her refunded charges. Stepping into the once intimidating lobby, she found it noticeably calmer. Some of the staff were new faces, trained in better customer service. Riley was still there, less brash, diligently assisting patrons. Though she avoided eye contact, Caroline felt a strange sense of sympathy for her. Perhaps Riley had been pressured by the system as well. 2. Caroline's surprise, Keanu Reeves had also decided to drop by, making good on his word to ensure everything was resolved fairly. Gone was the baseball cap, but his gentle demeanor was unchanged. Staff members, although excited, approached him with newfound respect. He greeted Caroline with a warm smile. "How are you holding up?" "Better, thanks to you," she said. "They're refunding everything, and it looks like they've called all the other affected customers, too." Keanu nodded. "That's good to hear. This bank might want to rehabilitate its reputation, so I'm not surprised they're acting quickly." Caroline gave a soft laugh. "I have no idea why you were here that day, but..." "Coincidence," he replied, a modest shrug accompanying his words. "I was just handling a routine matter. Right place, right time, I suppose." Caroline patted his arm. "For me and so many others, it was a blessing." The story, however, didn't end at Redwood Bank's local branch. Media outlets picked it up. Famous actor steps in to defend elderly woman, bank investigated for potential targeting of seniors, read the headlines. Public pressure intensified. Regulatory authorities announced they would be auditing not only Redwood Bank but other institutions with similar complaints. People began to scrutinize their bank statements more carefully, searching for unexplained fees. Seniors' advocacy groups rallied to use this incident as a prime example of why financial education and transparency are crucial. Within weeks, Redwood Bank's leadership committed to implementing clearer customer policies, especially for older clients and those on fixed incomes. They hosted community outreach sessions, teaching people how to monitor their finances. Though the transformation was spurred by a scandal, many acknowledged it was better late than never. Caroline's personal life changed subtly. Neighbors and acquaintances who had never bothered to check their statements now consulted her or offered to help each other. She became a sort of local advocate, encouraging her friends to stand up for themselves, no matter how large or small the injustice. As for Keanu Reeves, the incident confirmed what many of his fans already believed: behind the global fame lies a person of genuine compassion. Yet he declined to give official interviews about the matter, emphasizing that the focus should remain on justice for the customers. For Caroline, the memory of standing humiliated at that counter had shifted. The sense of shame she once felt was replaced by a profound realization: a single person speaking up, especially one with influence, can spark monumental change. Reflecting on this story, we're reminded of the profound truths that kindness, courage, and accountability hold in our lives. Caroline's quiet persistence demonstrated a powerful lesson: no one, regardless of age, status, or income, should ever feel dismissed or belittled. Her unwavering resolve became a testament to the undeniable worth of every individual. It also highlighted the importance of standing up for others. Whether we wield the influence of a movie star or are simply an everyday person in line, our actions have the potential to create ripples of positive change far beyond what we might imagine. This story also speaks to the importance of transparency, especially in institutions that wield immense power over people's lives. Financial systems must operate with clarity and integrity, ensuring that customers feel secure in questioning practices that affect them. Yet, perhaps the most inspiring takeaway is the power of collective vigilance. When people come together, standing firm against injustice, the tide of change becomes irresistible, forcing accountability and paving the way for fairness. Through kindness, courage, and unity, we hold the tools to shape a brighter and more just world for all. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of a time when you or someone you care about felt overlooked, let it be a gentle nudge to embrace attentiveness and courage. Take the time to check your own financial statements, reach out to family members who may need guidance, and foster open, supportive conversations about finances. Now, as we wrap up, here's a heartfelt message for all our amazing viewers. Reflect on how you can show empathy in your everyday interactions, whether through small gestures or significant actions. Share this story with someone who might find hope or guidance in its message. Spread the belief that respect and dignity should be extended to everyone, no matter their age, status, or wealth. Together, let's create a world where kindness, understanding, and fairness are the norm. And don't forget, if you found inspiration here, like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to Motivation for Success. We strive to bring you stories that uplift, inform, and remind us all that doing the right thing can happen anywhere, even in a seemingly ordinary bank lobby. Stay inspired, stay empathetic, and remember, we all have the power to make a difference, no matter who we are or where we find ourselves. Thank you for tuning in to Motivation for Success, and we'll see you in the next empowering story.